Section 9 of India, Persia, Mesopotamia, and Palestine. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by April 6090, California, United States of America. The World Story, Volume 2, India, Persia, Mesopotamia, and Palestine. Edited by Eva March Tappan. Section 9, Karma, A Story of Buddhist Ethics, by Paul Carus. Commit no evil, but do good, and let thy heart be pure. That is the gist of Buddhahood, the lore that will endure. The Dhammapada. Tavalla's Rice Cart. Long, long ago, in the days of early Buddhism, India was in a most prosperous condition. The Aryan inhabitants of the country were highly civilized, and the great cities were centers of industry, commerce, and learning. It was in these olden times that Pandu, a wealthy jeweler of the Brahmin caste, traveled in a carriage to Varanasi, which is now called Benares. He was bent on some lucrative banking business, and a slave who attended to the horses accompanied him. The jeweler was apparently in a hurry to reach his destination, and as the day was exceedingly pleasant, since a heavy thunderstorm had cooled the atmosphere, the horses sped along rapidly. While proceeding on their journey, the travelers overtook a samana, as the Buddhist monks were called, and the jeweler, observing the venerable appearance of the holy man, thought to himself, "This samana looks noble and saintly. Companionship with good men brings luck. Should he also be going to Varanasi, I will invite him to ride with me in my carriage." Having saluted the samana, the jeweler explained whither he was driving and at what inn he intended to stay in Varanasi. Learning that the samana, whose name was Narada, also was traveling to Varanasi, he asked him to accept a seat in his carriage. "I am obliged to you for your kindness," said the samana to the Brahmin, "for I am quite worn out by the long journey. As I have no possessions in this world, I cannot repay you in money, but it may happen that I can reward you with some spiritual treasure out of the wealth of the information I have received while following Shakyamuni, the Blessed One, the great Buddha, the teacher of gods and men." They traveled together in the carriage, and Pandu listened with pleasure to the instructive discourse of Narada. After about an hour's journey, they arrived at a place where the road had been rendered almost impassable by a washout caused by the recent rain, and a farmer's cart heavily laden with rice prevented further progress. The loss of a linchpin had caused one of the wheels to come off, and Davalla, the owner of the cart, was busily engaged in repairing the damage. He too was on his way to Varanasi to sell his rice, and was anxious to reach the city before the dawn of the next morning. If he was delayed a day or two longer, the rice merchants might have left town or bought all the stock they needed. When the jeweler saw that he could not proceed on his way unless the farmer's cart was removed, he began to grow angry, and ordered Mahaduta, his slave, to push the cart aside, so that his carriage could pass by. The farmer remonstrated because, being so near the slope of the road, it would jeopardize his cargo. But the Brahmin would not listen to the farmer, and bade his servant overturn the rice cart and push it aside. Mahaduta, an unusually strong man, who seemed to take delight in the injury of others, obeyed before the samana could interfere. The rice was thrown on the wayside, and the farmer's plight was worse than before. The poor farmer began to scold, but when the big burly Mahaduta raised his fist threateningly, he ceased his remonstrances and only growled his curses in a low undertone. When Pandu was about to continue his journey, the samana jumped out of the carriage and said, "Excuse me, sir, for leaving you here. I am under obligations for your kindness in giving me an hour's ride in your carriage. I was tired when you picked me up on the road, but now, thanks to your courtesy, I am rested, and recognizing in this farmer an incarnation of one of your ancestors, I cannot repay your kindness better than by assisting him in his troubles." The Brahmin jeweler looked at the samana in amazement. "That farmer, you say, is an incarnation of one of my ancestors? That is impossible." "I know," replied the samana, "that you are not aware of the numerous important relations which tie your fate to that of the farmer, but sometimes the smartest men are spiritually blind. So I regret that you harm your own interests, and I shall try to protect you against the wounds which you are about to inflict upon yourself." The wealthy merchant was not accustomed to being reprimanded, and feeling that the words of the samana although uttered with great kindness, contained a stinging reproach, bade his servant drive on without further delay. The jeweler's purse. The samana saluted Devala, the farmer, and began to help him repair his cart and load up the rice, part of which had been thrown out. The work proceeded quickly, and Devala thought, "This samana must be a holy man." Invisible devas seemed to assist him. Footnote: spiritual beings, gods or angels. End of footnote. I will ask him how I deserved ill treatment at the hands of the proud Brahmin. And he said, "Venerable sir, can you tell me why I suffer an injustice from a man to whom I have never done any harm?" And the samana said, "My dear friend, you do not suffer an injustice, but only receive in your present state of existence the same treatment which you visited upon the jeweler in a former life. You reap what you have sown, and your fate is the product of your deeds. Your very existence, such as it is now, is but the karma of your past lives." "What is my karma?" asked the farmer. "A man's karma," replied the samana, "consists of all the deeds, both good and evil, that he has done in his present and in any prior existence. Your life is a system of activities which have originated in the natural process of evolution, and have been transferred from generation to generation. The entire being of every one of us is an accumulation of inherited functions, which are modified by new experiences and deeds. Thus we are what we have done. Our karma constitutes our nature. We are our own creators." "That may be as you say," rejoined Devala, "but what have I to do with that overbearing Brahmin?" The samana replied, "You are in character quite similar to the Brahmin, and the karma that has shaped your destiny differs but little from his. If I am not mistaken in reading your thoughts, I should say that you would, even today, have done the same unto the jeweler if he had been in your place, and if you had such a strong slave at your command as he has, able to deal with you at his pleasure." The farmer confessed that if he had had the power, he would have felt little compunction in treating another man, who had happened to impede his way, as he had been treated by the Brahmin. But thinking of the retribution attendant upon unkind deeds, he resolved to be in the future more considerate with his fellow beings. The rice was loaded, and together they pursued their journey to Varanasi, when suddenly the horse jumped aside. "A snake! A snake!" shouted the farmer. But the samana looked closely at the object, at which the horse shuddered, jumped out of the cart, and saw that it was a purse full of gold. And the idea struck him, "This money can belong to no one but the wealthy jeweler." Narada took the purse and found that it contained a goodly sum of gold pieces. Then he said to the farmer, "Now is the time for you to teach the proud jeweler a lesson, and it will redound to your well-being both in this and in future lives. No revenge is sweeter than the requital of hatred with deeds of goodwill. I will give you this purse, and when you come to Varanasi, drive up to the inn which I shall point out to you, ask for Pandu, the Brahmin, and deliver to him his gold. He will excuse himself for the rudeness with which he has treated you, but tell him that you have forgiven him and wish him success in all his undertakings. For, let me tell you, the more successful he is, the better you will prosper. Your fate depends in many respects upon his fate. Should the jeweler demand any explanation, send him to the Vihara, footnote, Buddhist monastery, end of footnote, where he will find me ready to assist him with advice in case he may feel the need of it. Business in Benares, to corner the market of the necessities of life, is not a modern invention. The Old Testament contains the story of Joseph, the poor Hebrew youth who became minister of state, and succeeded with unscrupulous but clever business tricks in cornering the wheat market, so as to force the starved people to sell all their property, their privileges, and even their lives, to Pharaoh. And we read in the Jataka tales that one of the royal treasurers of Kasi, which is the old name of Varanasi, made his first great success in life by cornering the grass market of the metropolis on the day of the arrival of a horse dealer with 500 horses. When Pandu the jeweler arrived at Varanasi, it so happened that a bold speculator had brought about a corner in rice, and Malika, a rich banker and a business friend of Pandu, was in great distress. On meeting the jeweler, he said, "I am a ruined man, and can do no business with you, unless I can buy a cart of the best rice for the king's table. I have a rival banker in Varanasi who, learning that I had made a contract with the royal treasurer to deliver the rice tomorrow morning, and being desirous to bring about my destruction, has bought up all the rice in Varanasi. The royal treasurer must have received a bribe," for he will not release me from my contract, and tomorrow I shall be a ruined man, unless Krishna will send an angel from heaven to help me. Footnote: a Brahmin god. End of footnote. While Mallika was still lamenting the poverty to which his rival would reduce him, Pandu missed his purse. Searching his carriage without being able to find it, he suspected his slave Mahaduta, and calling the police, accused him of theft and had him bound and cruelly tortured to extort a confession. The slave in his agonies cried, "I am innocent. Let me go, for I cannot stand this pain. I am quite innocent, at least of this crime, and suffer now for other sins. Oh, that I could beg the farmer's pardon, whom, for the sake of my master, I wronged without any cause. This torture, I believe, is a punishment for my rudeness." While the officer was still applying the lash to the back of the slave, the farmer arrived at the inn and, to the great astonishment of all concerned, delivered the purse. The slave was at once released from the hands of his torturer, but being dissatisfied with his master, he secretly left and joined a band of robbers in the mountains, who made him their chief on account of his great strength and courage. When Mallika heard that the farmer had the best rice to sell, fit for delivery to the royal table, he at once bought the whole cartload for treble the price that the farmer had ever received. Pandu, however, glad at heart to have his money restored, rewarded the honest finder, and hastened at once to the vihara to receive further explanation from Narada, the samana. Narada said, "I might give you an explanation, but knowing that you are unable to understand a spiritual truth, I prefer to remain silent. Yet I shall give you some advice. Treat every man whom you meet as your own self. Serve him as you would demand to be served yourself. For our karma travels. It walks apace, though, and the journey is often long. But be it good or evil, finally it will come home to us. Therefore it is said, slowly but surely deeds home to the doer creep. Of kindness sow thy seeds, and bliss as harvest reap." "Give me, O Samana, the explanation," said the jeweler, "and I shall thereby be better able to follow your advice." The samana said, "Listen, then. I will give you the key to the mystery. If you do not understand it, have faith in what I say. Self is an illusion, and he whose mind is bent upon following self follows a will-o'-wisp, which leads him in the quagmire of sin. The illusion of self is like dust in your eyes that blinds your sight and prevents you from recognizing the close relations that obtain between yourself and your fellows, which are even closer than the relations that obtain among the various organs of your body. You must learn to trace the identity of yourself in the souls of other beings. Ignorance is the source of sin. There are few who know the truth. Let this motto be your talisman. Who injureth others, himself hurteth sore. Who others assisteth, himself helpeth more. Let the illusion of self from your mind disappear, and you'll find the way sure, the path will be clear. To him whose vision is dimmed by the dust of the world, the spiritual life appears to be cut into innumerable selves. Thus he will be puzzled in many ways concerning the nature of rebirth, and will be incapable of understanding the import of all comprehensive living kindness toward all living beings." The jeweler replied, "Your words, O venerable sir, have a deep significance, and I shall bear them in mind. I extended a small kindness, which caused me no expense whatever, to a poor samana on my way to Varanasi, and lo, how propitious has been the result! I am deeply in your debt, for without you I should not have only lost my purse, but would have been prevented from doing business in Varanasi, which greatly increases my wealth, while if it had been left undone, it might have reduced me to a state of wretched poverty. In addition, your thoughtfulness and the arrival of the farmer's rice cart preserved the prosperity of my friend Mallika, the banker. If all men saw the truth of your maxims, how much better the world would be! Evils would be lessened and the public welfare enhanced." The samana replied, "Among all the religions there is none like that of the Buddha. It is glorious in the beginning, glorious in the middle, and glorious in the end. It is glorious in the letter and glorious in the spirit. It is the religion of loving kindness that rids man of the narrowness of egotism and elevates him above his petty self to the bliss of enlightenment, which manifests itself in righteousness." Pandu nodded assent and said, "As I am anxious to let the truth of the Buddha be understood, I shall found a vihara at my native place, Kaushambi, and invite you to visit me, so that I may dedicate the place to the brotherhood of Buddha's disciples among the robbers. Years passed, and Pandu's Vihara at Kaushambi became a place in which wise samanas used to stay, and it was renowned as a center of enlightenment for the people of the town. At that time the king of a neighboring country had heard the beauty of Pandu's jewelry, and he sent his treasurer to order a royal diadem to be wrought in pure gold and set with the most precious stones of India. Pandu gladly accepted the order and executed a crown of the most exquisite design. When he had finished the work, he started for the residence of the king, and as he expected to transact other profitable business, took with him a great store of gold pieces. The caravan carrying his goods was protected by a strong escort of armed men. But when they reached the mountains, they were attacked by a band of robbers led by Mahaduta, who beat them and took away all the jewelry and the gold, and Pandu escaped with great difficulty. This calamity was a blow to Pandu's prosperity, and as he had suffered some other severe losses, his wealth was greatly reduced. Pandu was much distressed, but he bore his misfortunes without complaint, thinking to himself, "I have deserved these losses for the sins committed during my past existence. In my younger years I was very hard on other people. Because I now reap the harvest of my evil deeds, I have no reason for complaint." As he had grown in kindness toward all beings, his misfortunes only served to purify his heart, and his chief regret, when thinking of his reduced means, was that he had become unable to do good and help his friends in the Vihara to spread the truths of religion. Again years passed on, and it happened that Panthanka, a young samana and disciple of Narada, was traveling through the mountains of Kaushambi, and he fell among the robbers in the mountains. As he had nothing in his possession, the robber chief beat him severely and let him go. On the next morning, Panthanka, while pursuing his way through the woods, heard a noise of men quarreling and fighting, and going to the place he saw a number of robbers, all of them in a great rage, and in their midst stood Mahaduta, their chief, and Mahaduta was desperately defending himself against them, like a lion surrounded by hounds, and he slew several of his aggressors with formidable blows. But there were too many for him. At last he succumbed and fell to the ground as if dead, covered with wounds. As soon as the robbers had left the place, the young samana approached to see whether he could be of any assistance to the wounded men. He found that all the robbers were dead, and there was but little life left in the chief. At once Panthanka went down to the little brooklet which was murmuring near by, fetched fresh water in his bowl, and brought it to the dying man. Mahaduta opened his eyes, and gnashing his teeth, said, "Where are those ungrateful dogs whom I have led to victory and success? Without me as their chief, they will soon perish like jackals hunted down by skillful hunters." "Do not think of your comrades, the companions of your sinful life," said Panthanka, "but think of your own fate, and accept in the last moment the chance of salvation that is offered you. Here is water to drink, and let me dress your wounds. Perhaps I may save your life." "Alas, alas!" replied Mahaduta. "Are you not the man whom I beat but yesterday? And now you come to my assistance to assuage my pain? You bring me fresh water to quench my thirst and try to save my life. It is useless, honorable sir. I am a doomed man. The churls have wounded me unto death, the ungrateful cowards. They have dealt me the blow which I taught them." "You reap what you have sown," continued the samana. "Had you taught your comrades acts of kindness, you would have received from them acts of kindness. But having taught them the lesson of slaughter, it is but your own deed that you are slain by their hands." "True, very true," said the robber chief. "My fate is well deserved, but how sad is my lot, that I must reap the full harvest of all my evil deeds in future existences. Advise me, O holy sir, what can I do to lighten the sins of my life, which oppress me like a great rock placed upon my breast, taking away the breath from my lungs?" Said Panthanka, "Root out your sinful desires, destroy all evil passions, and fill your heart with kindness toward all your fellow beings." The Spider Web. While the charitable samana washed the wounds, the robber chief said, "I have done much evil and no good. How can I extricate myself from the net of sorrow which I have woven out of the evil desires of my own heart? My karma will lead me to hell, and I shall never be able to walk in the path of salvation." Said the samana, "Indeed, your karma will in its future incarnations reap the seeds of evil that you have sown. There is no escape from the consequences of our actions. But there is no cause for despair. The man who is converted and has rooted out the illusion of self, with all its lusts and sinful desires, will be a source of blessing to himself and others. As an illustration, I will tell you the story of the great robber Kandata, who died without repentance and was reborn as a demon in hell, where he suffered for his evil deeds the most terrible agonies and pains. He had been in hell several kalpas, a long period of time, an aeon, and was unable to rise out of his wretched condition. When Buddha appeared upon earth and attained to the blessed state of enlightenment, at that memorable moment a ray of light fell down into hell, quickening all the demons with life and hope, and the robber Kandata cried aloud, "O blessed Buddha, have mercy upon me! I suffer greatly, and although I have done evil, I am anxious to walk in the noble path of righteousness. But I cannot extricate myself from the net of sorrow. Help me, O Lord, have mercy on me!" Now, it is the law of karma that evil deeds lead to destruction, for absolute evil is so bad that it cannot exist. Absolute evil involves impossibility of existence, but good deeds lead to life. Thus there is a final end to every deed that is done, but there is no end to the development of good deeds. The least act of goodness bears fruit containing new seeds of goodness, and they continue to grow. They nourish the poor suffering creatures in their repeated wanderings in the eternal round of samsara, until they reach the final deliverance from all evil in nirvana. Samsara is the restlessness of the world and of worldly life. Nirvana is the peace of mind of him who has overcome the illusion of self. When Buddha, the Lord, heard the prayer of the demons suffering in hell, he said, "Kandata, did you ever perform an act of kindness? It will now return to you and help you rise again. But you cannot be rescued unless the intense sufferings which you endure as consequences of your evil deeds have dispelled all conceit of selfhood, and have purified your soul of vanity, lust, and envy." Kandata remained silent, for he had been a cruel man. But the Tathagata, in his omniscience, saw all the deeds done by the poor wretch, and he perceived that once in his life, when walking through the woods, he had seen a spider crawling on the ground, and he thought to himself, "I will not step upon the spider, for he is a harmless creature and hurts nobody." Buddha looked with compassion upon the tortures of Kandata, and sent down a spider on a cobweb, and the spider said, "Take hold of the web and climb up." Having attached the web at the bottom of hell, the spider withdrew. Kandata eagerly seized the thin thread and made great efforts to climb up, and he succeeded. The web was so strong that it held, and he ascended higher and higher. Suddenly he felt the thread trembling and shaking, for behind him some of his fellow sufferers were beginning to climb on. Kandata became frightened. He saw the thinness of the web, and observed that it was elastic, for under the increased weight it stretched out, yet it still seemed strong enough to carry him. Kandata had heretofore only looked up. He now looked down and saw following close upon his heels, also climbing up on the cobweb, a numberless mob of the denizens of hell. "How can this thin thread bear the weight of all?" he thought to himself. Seized with fear, he shouted loudly, "Let go the cobweb! It is mine!" At once the cobweb broke, and Kandata fell back into hell. The illusion of self was still upon Kandata. He did not know the miraculous power of a sincere longing to rise upwards and enter the noble path of righteousness. It is thin like a cobweb, but it will carry millions of people, and the more there are that climb it, the easier will be the efforts of every one of them. But as soon as the idea arises in a man's heart, "This is mine, let the bliss of righteousness be mine alone, and let no one else partake of it," the thread breaks, and he will fall back into his old condition of selfhood. For selfhood is damnation, and truth is bliss. What is hell? It is nothing but egotism, and nirvana is a life of righteousness. "Let me take hold of the spider web," said the dying robber chief, when the samana had finished his story, "and I will pull myself up out of the depths of hell." The conversion of the robber chief. Mahaduta lay quiet for a while to collect his thoughts, and then he addressed the samana not without effort. "Listen, honorable sir, I will make a confession. I was the servant of Pandu, the jeweler of Kaushambi, but when he unjustly had me tortured, I ran away and became a chief of robbers. Some time ago, when I heard from my spies that Pandu was passing through the mountains, I succeeded in robbing him of a great part of his wealth. Will you now go to him and tell him that I have forgiven from the bottom of my heart the injury which he unjustly inflicted upon me, and ask him, too, to pardon me for having robbed him? While I stayed with him, his heart was as hard as flint, and I learned to imitate the selfishness of his character. I have heard that he has become benevolent and is now pointed out as an example of goodness and justice. He has laid up treasures, of which no robber can ever deprive him, while I fear that my karma will continue to linger in the course of evil deeds. But I do not wish to remain in his debt so long as it is still in my power to pay him. My heart has undergone a complete change. My evil passions are subdued, and the few moments of life left me shall be spent in the endeavor to continue after death in the good karma of righteous aspirations. Therefore, inform Pandu that I have kept the gold crown which he wrought for the king, and all his treasures, and have hidden them in a cave near by. There were only 2 of the robbers under my command who knew of it, and both are now dead. Let Pandu take a number of armed men and come to the place and take back the property of which I have deprived him. One act of justice will atone for some of my sins. It will help to cleanse my soul of its impurities and give me a start in the right direction on my search for salvation." Then Mahaduta described the location of the cave and fell back exhausted. For a while he lay with his eyes closed as though sleeping. The pain of his wounds had ceased, and he began to breathe quietly, but his life was slowly ebbing away, and now he seemed to awake as from a pleasant dream. "Venerable sir," said he, "what a blessing for me that our Buddha came upon earth and taught you, and caused our paths to meet, and made you comfort me. While I lay dozing, I beheld as in a vision the scene of the Tathagata's final entering to nirvana. In former years I saw a picture of it which made a deep impression on my mind, and the recollection of it is a solace to me in my dying hour." "Indeed, it is a blessing," replied the samana, "that the Buddha appeared upon earth. He dispelled the darkness begotten by ill will and error, and attained supreme enlightenment. He lived among us as one of us, being subject to the ills of life, pain, disease, and death, not unlike any mortal. Yet he extinguished in himself all selfishness, all lust, all greed for wealth and love of pleasure, all ambition for fame or power, all hankering after things of the world and clinging to anything transitory and elusive. He was bent only on the one aim, to reach the immortal and to actualize in his being that which cannot die. Through the good karma of former existences and his own life, he reached at last the blessed state of nirvana, and when the end came he passed away in the final passing away, which leaves nothing behind but extinguishes all that is transitory and mortal. Oh, that all men could give up clinging and thereby rid themselves of passion, envy, and hatred!" Mahaduta imbibed the words of the samana with the eagerness of a thirsty man who is refreshed by a drink of water that is pure and cool and sweet. He wanted to speak, but he could scarcely rally strength enough to open his mouth and move his lips. He beckoned assent and showed his anxiety to embrace the doctrine of the Tathagata. Panthanka wetted the dying man's lips and soothed his pain, and when the robber chief, unable to speak, silently folded his hands, he spoke for him and gave utterance to such vows as the latter words was ready to make. The samana's words were like music to the ears of Mahaduta. Filled with the joy that originates with good resolutions and entranced by the prospect of an advance in the search for a higher and better life, his eyes began to stare and all the pain ceased. So the robber chief died, converted in the arms of the samana, the converted robber's tomb. As soon as Panthanka, the young samana, had reached Kaushambi, he went to the Vihara and inquired for Pandu the jeweler. Being directed to his residence, he gave him a full account of his recent adventure into the forest, and Pandu set out with an escort of armed men and secured the treasures which the robber chief had concealed in the cave. Near by they found the remains of the robber chief and his slain comrades, and they gathered the bodies in a heap and burned them with all honors. The ashes were collected in an urn and buried in a tumulus on which a stone was placed with an inscription written by Panthanka, which contained a brief report of Mahaduta's conversion. Before Pandu's party returned home, Panthanka held a memorial service at the tumulus in which he explained the significance of karma, discoursing on the words of Buddha. "By ourselves is evil done. By ourselves we pain endure. By ourselves we cease from wrong. By ourselves become we pure. No one saves us but ourselves. No one can and no one may. We ourselves must walk the path. Buddhas merely teach the way." Our karma, the samana said, is not the work of Isavara, or Brahma, or Indra, or any one of the gods. Our karma is the product of our own actions. My action is the womb that bears me. It is the inheritance which devolves upon me. It is the curse of my misdeeds and the blessing of my righteousness. My action is the resource by which alone I can work out my salvation. Then the samana paused and added, "While every one is the maker of his own karma, and we reap what we have sown, at the same time co-responsible for the evils of evildoers. Such is the interrelation of karma, that the errors of one person are mostly mere echoes of the errors of others. Neither the curse of our failings nor the bliss of our goodness is purely our own. Therefore, when we judge the bad, the vicious, the criminal, let us not withhold from them our sympathy, for we are partners of their guilt. Among the people of the surrounding villages, the tumulus became known as the converted robbers' tomb, and in later years a little shrine was built on the spot where wanderers used to rest and invoke the Buddha for the conversion of robbers and thieves, the bequest of a good karma. Pandu carried all his treasures back to Kaushambi, using with discretion the wealth thus unexpectedly regained. He became richer and more powerful than he had ever been before, and when he was dying at an advanced age, he had all his sons and daughters and grandchildren gathered round him and said unto them, "My dear children, do not blame others for your lack of success. Seek the cause of your ills in yourselves. Unless you are blinded by vanity, you will discover your fault, and having discovered it, you will see the way out of it. The remedy for your ills, too, lies in yourselves. Never let your mental eyes be covered by the dust of selfishness, and remember the words which have proved a talisman in my life. Who injureth others, himself hurteth sore. Who others assisteth, himself helpeth more. Let the illusion of self from your mind disappear, and you'll find the way sure, the path will be clear. If you heed my words and obey these injunctions, you will, when you come to die, continue to live in the good karma that you have stored up, and your souls will be immortalized according to your deeds." End of section 9. This recording is in the public domain.